Hey everyone, it's the year is 1999, back at you again with another video. In today's video, we are carrying on from last time with the new tabletop role-playing game I'm making called Dwelvers in the Dungeon. Last time I explained the basics of character creation, and today we're going to go over how combat works and what the various skills do. Now, I mentioned briefly in the last video the primary rules for attacking. You roll the weapon's damage, you add your, weapon stat, and then you subtract that by the target's defense, and whatever's left over is dealt as damage to the target. But let's look a little bit more specifically about how that whole process works.
Okay, so there are 12 damage types. There is smashing, cutting, impaling, electric, flame, ice, toxic, corrosive, luminous, shadow, suffocation, and strain. Now, most of the time you won't really need to worry about damage variety, but some creatures take more or less damage to different varieties. Also, the Game Master may decide that certain damage types have extra effects depending on the circumstances. For instance, electric attacks may hit extra targets who are standing in water, for instance. Or flame damage might ignite nearby trees and wooden objects and the like. Now, suffocation and strain damage are special varieties that are typically not dealt by weapons. Usually, strain happens if you exceed your carrying capacity, as we mentioned last time, and suffocation that can happen, if you're drowning underwater, or there are special choke attacks that you can use to try to suffocate someone, but we'll get to that later. Now, you know how attack versus defense works, and defense is augmented by armor. Armor is pretty straightforward. There's only three types, well, kind of four. There is light armor, like leather, that gives you +2 to defense. Moderate armor, like a chain shirt or something, that gives you 3 defense points. And then heavy armor, that's something like plate mail. It gives you 5 defense points, but you have to have a strength of at least 10 to actually use it. Then you can also hold a shield to get +2 defense points, but that requires one hand to use. And shields, there can be different benefits or penalties depending on how you've made your character. For instance, mages, they get a penalty to their spell casting if they're holding a shield, and scouts, they're not good at using their close weapons when they're holding a shield, but anyone can still hold it. Warriors and priests, though, they're just a little bit better at it because they don't get as many penalties. Now, speaking of weapons, though, we don't really have time to go through every weapon, but there are 3 main types. As we've mentioned before, there's the melee weapons like clubs, close melee weapons like daggers, and then ranged weapons like bows. Now, as you can imagine, ranged weapons can be used at a distance. The difference between melee and close melee is how close you need to be. Close melee requires you to get really up close and personal, so because of that, you get a penalty to your defense. The trade-off is that close melee weapons usually have special properties. And side note, the term close melee isn't something I'm particularly tied to. If you have any ideas for it, please let me know down in the comments. And, there's all sorts of different varieties of weapons. Now, a ranged weapon, though, will have a stated range that it can normally fire at. And you can also usually fire up to twice that normal amount, but at a -10 penalty. So you can try it, but it probably won't go as well. But the option is there. Now let's talk about some of the different weapon types. Well, there's things like clubs, those do 1d6 cutting damage. There's the sword, that's 2d6 cutting. Then there is, for instance, a spear, that's 1d6 impaling damage, but you get a little bit extra reach with it. And then there's a bow, which, as we were talking about a moment ago, is a ranged weapon, and that's 2d6 impaling damage and can normally fire up to 45 feet away. And the thing is that, ranged weapons like bows, those are a lot harder to find. You can't really just start with them. You do have enough starting gold to purchase a sling if you want, and that's like a weaker ranged weapon, but ordinarily, if you want a bow, you need to go out there and be able to find it in the dungeon. And that's just part of the challenge of the game. Okay, now let's talk about turns and rounds. So, a round in combat is marked by a series of turns taken by the creatures involved in battle. It lasts a total of 10 seconds in-game, and each turn should last no more than about a minute at the table. And a turn can consist of an option to move, an action, and an optional short action. Then turn order is determined by every creature rolling plus nimbleness to determine, how they're going to go. Battles go in the order from highest to lowest roll. pretty straightforward. Now, as for moving around on your turn, well, by default, Dwelvers can move a total of 25 feet on their turn, regardless of race size, and then movement can be spread out before and after actions or in any combination that you like. So you could move, attack, then move again. And you can also jump up to 10 feet, but you have to have moved at least 10 feet in a straight line on your turn before that. And there are various special abilities and spells that can help you with jumping. Okay, now that's combat, but now let's take a look at skills. Once again, this is a d6 system, so when you're making a skill check, roll 1d6 plus the skill's base stat plus any training points if you have them. Now, when you first meet your character, you have 6 skill points to spread among any number of skills, and you cannot have any more than 3 points in any one skill per level. So, for example, at level 1, you can have 3 points in one skill, 2 points in another, and then 1 in a third. Or you can also put 1 point in 6 different skills. And on the screen here, I've mapped out a bunch of different combinations of things you can try. And so, yeah, you can try out different things that depending on what you want your character to be good in. And this can be, part of your character's theme. Like, for instance, you might have one person that puts a lot of skills into demolish, and they're your demolition type. They knock down all the walls in the dungeon to get to the treasure faster and to shake up the battlefield. And then, when you're rolling for your skill check, the total that you need to achieve will vary based on the circumstances and how difficult the thing is that you're trying to achieve. I don't quite have guidelines yet for what scores should be for, particular types of checks or for overcoming certain obstacles, but with playtesting we should be able to get that worked out a little bit. So what are these skills? Well, first of all, there are 4 battle skills. You can take training points in melee, close melee, ranged, and battle magic. When you put 5 points in any battle skill, you get an extra feature. Leveling up melee gives you better defense because you can parry. Leveling up close melee lets you do extra damage if you deal any. Leveling up ranged increases your range, and leveling up magic gives you more spells. So the way that would work is that when you're making your attack roll, you would add your training points onto this. So let's say, for instance, you had a warrior with 3 points in, battle melee attacks, and they're holding a sword, then they would roll 2d6 plus their strength score plus the 3. So that can give you a little edge in battle. Now, 2 of these skills are based on nimbleness. The first one is lockpicking. This skill is used to unlock things like chests and doors, and it can also be used to study small mechanisms. The other nimbleness skill is sneak. This check is for going unnoticed, whether you need to slip past a bandit camp or subtly put your hand on the lever that opens the pit that the bad guy is standing on.
To the secret lab. Pull the lever, Grunk. Wrong lever! Huh? Why do we even have that lever?
Then there are 5 comprehension-based skill checks. The first is just called magic, and this is for understanding runes, determining the effects of potions, checking for the signs of spells, and things like that. This can be like a good catch-all skill for arcane effects if you're not sure what kind of skill check to ask for. Next is architecture. It's based on comprehension, and this skill is used for understanding how structures are made. And it can be used to, find weak spots in walls and even to find hidden doors. Yep, then there's nature, and this skill is used to understand plants, animals, fungi, and other elements of nature, as you will. And this could be used to figuring out, what is safe to eat or what could be used to poison someone.
I know! We can act like plants! Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis.
Then there's awareness. This skill is used to notice things that might not immediately be obvious. But, as a note though, if the game master should tell you if something is clearly noticeable in a room. For instance, it shouldn't require an awareness check to see that there's some creepy guy in a robe chanting a spell. Yeah, so don't call for awareness if it should be immediately obvious. And then the last comprehension-based skill is trap making. And this skill is used to know how traps work. It can let you disable existing traps and make your own. So that can come in handy when you're, going through the dungeon and you want to get an upper hand on the creatures there. And then there are 4 skills based on grace. First is spirituality, and this skill is used for understanding spiritual matters. That might be, to get information on how to summon a demon, the origin of a holy symbol, or what to say to a cultist to win them over. And similarly to that, there's the influence skill. This is a skill used to convince NPCs of things. This might be to have an enemy surrender in combat, or to, get a discount at a shop or something like that. And the last grace-based skill is First Aid. This skill is used primarily for saving your fellow Dwelvers when they reach 0 HP, but it could also be used for other purposes. For instance, if someone is bleeding out, then a First Aid check might help them. Okay, then there is one strength-based skill, Demolish, and this skill is used to break things down. Whether it be walls, statues, or barriers, some things just need to be brought right down.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no! Oh yeah!
And now there is one more skill based on durability, and this is called breath holding. Pretty straightforward. It's for when you need to not breathe. Maybe because you're going underwater or to avoid some kind of poisonous cloud. Pretty straightforward. And that can let you hold your breath for a number of rounds equal to your breath hold roll. Now, in addition to, the skills themselves, there's also a number of tools you can get to help with skills. Like, for instance, you could get like a pickaxe to help you make demolish checks against rocks, or medicine to help you with first aid checks. One more thing I want to talk about today is something related to skills, and that is carrying capacity. By default, you can comfortably carry up to 20 times your strength score. The average Dwelver has a strength of 4, so they can comfortably carry up to 80 pounds without a movement penalty. Fun fact, in real life, based on my research, a typical person can carry 40 pounds long distances. So as far as fantasy games go, the heroes having only doubled the typical carry weight is pretty grounded, I would say. Next, you can then carry up to 40 times your strength, but you can only move at half your normal speed. So you can still do it, but it'll slow you down. But hey, if you don't have very far to go, or if you have plenty of time, go ahead and load up on that loot. But the final obstacle is 50 times your strength score. This is the absolute most that you can carry without some kind of magical intervention, and every round you take 1 strain damage. So, if you're going to be walking around with this, you better have a very good reason for it.
So there we go. That's the broad strokes of combat and skills and how all that works. Next time we're going to be talking more specifically about how combat works, get a little more in-depth with that. So till then, hope that you enjoyed this video. If you want to see another one from me, hopefully this video is coming out on Christmas. So I'm going to link in the description below to one from a few years ago. That was like a D&D Christmas adventure that I had planned out. So you can go check that out. Until next time, hope you enjoyed this video. Till next time, have a great day and God bless.